Hey fellow explorers, in today's video we're going to be exploring 10 issues facing modern tourism today. And I had a few different titles for this video originally as I was writing the outline for it. I started with titles like, has tourism gone all wrong? Has the internet ruined tourism? Is tourism ruining the world? Ultimately, I decided to ratchet it back and go for the less clickbaity title, so thank you for clicking in and checking out this video. I started on those sorts of titles because my inspiration for this video was for a couple of articles I read in the mainstream media just recently, in particular this one from CNN Travel titled, How It All Went Wrong for Tourism. I also read this article in the Los Angeles Times. This is a letter to the editor. Laguna Beach learns the truth about tourism. It kills the quality of life. Oof. Well, this video is going to be a little different than my typical travel tips video because there's not a lot of travel tips in here, but there's really more of a travel essay. I just want to share my thoughts on this current dialogue about, is tourism good? Is tourism bad? People say they're all fed up with the tourists. Are all tourists evil? Some people want them to go home and never come back. Is that really the right answer? And if that did happen, would that really improve the situation? I think I have a unique perspective to offer on this issue. One, certainly because I make a lot of videos in this space. I've been a lot of places, so I've seen a lot of things and experienced it different ways. And two, I grew up and lived a big portion of my life in sunny San Diego, California, one of the USA's #1 tourism destinations, and actually #1 destination during COVID time. And San Diego's #1 industry is tourism. There are 200,000 jobs in San Diego directly associated with the tourism industry, and so I've grown up all my life in a place that lots of people want to come and visit. And so why, in these articles, do they say tourism went wrong and that it ruins lives in Laguna Beach? And then we'll get into the 10 issues as I've kind of pulled them apart from this and all my other readings as of late. So the CNN Travel article starts by saying that there's been protests in the streets, a graffiti warning tourists to go home, local populations are dwindling as short-term rentals mushroom and price residents out. It feels like this year was the year that tourism turned nasty and local communities started pushing back. The Laguna Beach article in the LA Times, in this letter to the editor, this is someone that wrote in to LA Times, so not written by them, but they did decide to publish this letter. They said, to the editor, locals in Laguna Beach are whining about something that people everywhere already know: tourism destroys the quality of life. Tourists act like jerks when they're visiting, doing things they wouldn't think of doing while at home. Ask a native Hawaiian how much they like tourism. People in Spain and Italy feel the same way. The challenges of all these visitors, over-tourism, far outweigh the benefits. The tourism shills want too much, including our quality of life. Now, by the way, this is as records a live stream, so I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on these various issues. If you're watching the archive, I would love to hear your thoughts as well. And Carmen, right off the bat, says, I saw this Laguna Beach article. It's not fair. Probably fair, I assume, is what Carmen meant to say. Yes, so let me hear your thoughts as we go. All right, so no fancy graphics in this video today, just some numbers to go with the 10 different issues. So the #1 issue, the #1 issue that I think I hear people say is they say, I can't afford to live here anymore because so many people are coming to this place. This place has become unaffordable to live in. And of course, people point to the modern issue in tourism, which is vacation rentals. Vacation rentals have taken away places people could have rented or bought. Now, of course, there's been vacation rentals for a long time, but they've typically been hard to find, hard to book. You had to know it, know the phone number, know the place. But now we have the internet, and now we have sites like Airbnb where you can type in a city like Venice, Italy, and find out that there are 8,000 properties listed in Venice alone on Airbnb, compared to 50,000 residents. Yes, 50,000 people live in Venice, Italy, and there are 8,000 units listed as Airbnbs. Back in the day, it would have been much harder to find those, and I guarantee there would have been many less of them. Now, I see this in a ton more places than just Venice, Italy. I see it a lot in mountain towns in the USA, where the hotel development has often been severely limited. So there's few hotels. Those few hotels often have really high prices if they're nice, or if they're not nice, then the hotels are often really lousy because there's not enough of them and people will stay there anyway. So it's really profitable in those destinations to turn residential units into Airbnbs or vacation rentals. I think Venice, Italy is the same thing. Venice, Italy has severe development restrictions. You can't build anything tall, you can't tear things down, and so there are very few hotels in Venice, so it's very profitable to buy an apartment and turn it into a vacation rental. This is definitely a complaint that I hear by many in Hawaii. They can't afford to live where their family has been for generations, and so they're forced to move to other places that have a cheaper cost of living. Now, what's really interesting about where many of the Hawaiians move is, you know where the number one actually destination that they move to from Hawaii is? Las Vegas. Las Vegas, a city with even more tourism, but yet somehow it still has a lower cost of living than Hawaii. Of course, tourism isn't the only cause of this. COVID certainly has been a factor in this, where people made a great reevaluation of their lives, and many people have said, you know what, I don't want to be in the rat race anymore. I don't want to be in the big city anymore. I don't want to be in ugly places. I don't want to have to be taking the subway underground all the time. I want to live in a beautiful place with a higher perceived quality of life. Now, while I'm personally not a fan of Airbnbs, there are clearly a ton of people who are. And now they might get to travel to a place that they couldn't have because of the price or simply unavailability, or perhaps even more comfortably, if they're a big family, if they've got kids, it's easier to get a kitchen and a fridge and all those amenities that you might want. Now, Carmen says, what's the solution to vacation rentals taking over cities? Is it hotels? I think it probably starts with some form of regulation, Carmen. Regulating where Airbnbs can be, how many Airbnbs there can be. Certainly something that San Diego has put in place is absolutely that. Regulations on where you can have an Airbnb, a total cap on Airbnbs. But saying, like, we have to do something about this because people who lived in a residential neighborhood where it was a bunch of people, and then all of a sudden it's now a bunch of vacation rentals, isn't a neighborhood that all of a sudden people want to live in anymore. Points Traveler says that issue sounds like Banff, a lack of nice hotels. Banff has a couple of nice hotels, the Fairmonts. They're amazing and they're really expensive, and then everything else is like, yeah, not as nice. And so there you go, you get a lot of Airbnbs too. Esther says Airbnb is regulated, banned in certain cities, is it not? And this is where I would say it is regulated as compared to hotels very poorly. And it might be banned where they like pass a law against Airbnb, but in places where it's not, then it's like, you know, hotels, you got to get like approval to build one. It's noticeable when you build one. It's not that noticeable when you open up an Airbnb. It's a lot harder to tell that that's a vacation rental, or that it's going to be one, or that people in the neighborhood can say, hey, I don't want that to be an Airbnb. But if there was a hotel being built by you, people would certainly know that right away. Trinidaddy, we're going to get to this point, but Trinidaddy points out and says in Jamaica, hotels have claimed beaches traditionally used by local communities for fishing over many generations, restricting access for the natives who rely on these areas. I'm going to get to all-inclusive resorts in a moment because I think that's what that tends to be. Okay. So, oh yeah, another note on this Airbnb restriction, like Palm Springs is recently one that has limited Airbnbs, and like you have to apply for them. And so like a number of people that have had Airbnbs now can't use them anymore. They can't rent them out. And as soon as this regulation was passed, property values have just gone down and down and down and down and down, which is good if you are actually somebody who wants to like buy something in that place. It's certainly bad if you're one of the people that bought an Airbnb, and it was bad if you were someone who bought into the neighborhood in the last 3 years when it was all crazy. But overall, for affordability of housing, probably turns out to be better that the crazy Airbnb rentals aren't driving up the price of places where people might actually want to live. Okay, the second issue facing modern tourism today is that places that locals used to enjoy are now overrun by tourists, making them too busy, so they can't enjoy them anymore. Or even places that you used to enjoy as a tourist, you can't anymore because there's too many other people going there. When you started going there, it was undiscovered, but now it's been discovered by the masses and the place is ruined, leading to traffic, long lines, trash, locusts, volcano eruptions, even Godzilla. Okay, maybe I exaggerated about the volcanoes and Godzilla, but that's, by the way, that's often how these articles tend to read. Now, I've certainly experienced some of this growing up in San Diego. As a kid, my family, we used to like to go hike Torrey Pines State Park. It's a really beautiful state park and hiking area, famous for this special tree, the Torrey Pine. And when I would go there in the 80s, growing up, there was like never anybody there. There just really wasn't. It was super easy to park. It was cheap to park. It was peaceful. Now it's definitely been discovered. Now, if you search the internet and you are like, what's the best hiking trail in San Diego? You know what comes up? Torrey Pines. And so now the parking is $25, and now you can't even park anywhere near the trails. You got to park down in this like other parking lot and walk like 30 minutes just to get to the trails. So yes, I can feel that too. Do I hate the tourists because of it? No, I'm glad they get a piece and they get to discover Torrey Pines. And for me, then I just figure out, well, when don't the tourists come to Torrey Pines? 5 o'clock on a Tuesday. And so that's when I'm gonna go take the hike, when everybody else is hiking it at noon on a Saturday or Sunday, because everybody seems to like to hike from 10 to 2 around lunchtime. Now, a more well-known name in the USA, Zion National Park in Utah, one of the top 3 national parks in the USA, right after the Grand Canyon. Like 5 million people visit this park every year. Some of the hiking trails in Zion have gotten so busy that they've gotten dangerous. In particular, this one called Angel's Landing, where there have been so many people on it, the trail is so narrow that people have fallen to their death from this trail. So they've had to introduce a reservation system. Well, they didn't have to introduce a reservation system, but they had to do something to make it less dangerous. So what the National Park Service did, is they introduced reservations, that you need to make a reservation to go hike Angel's Landing. How do you make a reservation? They've got 2 lotteries, one that you can do in advance, and then one that you can do the day before. Both of them cost $6 to enter. Whether you win or not, it costs you $6 for the privilege for entering the lottery, but there's no guarantees, and so maybe, like me, you go to Zion National Park and you don't get to hike Angel's Landing anymore because you don't win the lottery. Now, with all of these issues and all of these things, I feel like there's pros and there's cons. Certainly, I've just talked about some cons, but everyone, I think, has a pro. And I think the pro on more people coming to places is, particularly for the locals, that they're supporting businesses that often set up in places that tourists frequent. For example, convention centers often have a lot of restaurants around them so people can eat dinner close by. In my case, in Torrey Pines, there have been a number of restaurants that are just down the street, even a pizza place that I like now that didn't used to be there back in the day because nobody came, so there was no pizza place. But now that the hiking trail is busy, people are looking for a place to eat, so there can be a pizza place that I can get the pizza too that I enjoy. The Santa Monica Pier, I think, is a great example of this. One of the #1 places to visit in the Los Angeles area. Tons of tourists go to the Santa Monica Pier, and so there are tons of shops and restaurants and street vendors too, not just shops and restaurants, people that pull their carts up and things like that, to take some of the tourists' money. The joke that I have about street vendors is that if you're a street vendor selling food, the most important thing for you as a street vendor selling food is not that you have good food. The most important thing is whether the people nearby are hungry. Do you have hungry customers? Because if you have hungry customers, you can sell them just about anything. And Trinidaddy says, Instagram photos, selfies, food trucks, and sports games have ruined and trashed these beautiful places. And I would say that certainly that's another one of, a lot of this is going to come down to like regulations, rules. And I'm not a fan of like laws for everything, but I will say Torrey Pines, there is a gate, there is an admission, and they don't let in the food trucks, and they don't let in the sports games because it is a place where you enjoy nature. Yes, there's a lot of people, but they're still enjoying nature. Yes, in Santa Monica, there are a lot of these street vendors at the foot of the pier, but then if you want to be one that's actually like on the pier, there's a whole different permitting process that you have to go through. They limit them to make the experience on the pier actually better. Now, one of San Diego's most popular beaches that I spend a lot of time on growing up here is Mission Beach. It is famous for having a big wooden roller coaster on the beach. Very few of these wooden roller coasters still exist, but the one in Mission Beach is still operational. It wasn't for a long time, like it had a fire, and for 30 years it wasn't operational, but a group of local residents got together, saved up some money, started a nonprofit foundation to renovate this beautiful roller coaster, and today it's like the anchor of this amusement park by the beach. You go to the beach, it's iconic because you're in the water, and every 3 minutes you hear like, ah! Those are the people going down the roller coaster. In addition to that roller coaster, there's a big public swimming pool, like big swimming pool. You can pay something like $5, $7 to swim in the swimming pool. There's an arcade, and there's clean restrooms. And I say all these things to say that those are things where it is the tourists that keep the roller coaster afloat. It's the tourists that keep the arcade afloat. It's the tourists that keep that whole amusement park by the sea afloat, because there's just not enough people in San Diego, even though it's a big city, 3 million people, there's not enough people in San Diego to frequent that amusement park all year round. It's the tourists that are keeping that running, and then I can come and enjoy the roller coaster once every couple years, but I can enjoy the clean restrooms every time I go down to Mission Beach. The third issue facing modern tourism today is ghost towns created by all-inclusive resorts. And so this is one that I'm going to hit on Trinidaddy, and he even gave a different spin on it earlier, but I'm going to start with this ghost town side. And Carmen said, I just thought of tourists from cruise ships. The cruise ship want to keep their money on board rather than in the ports. They absolutely do, and I'm going to talk about cruise ships in this number. So all-inclusive resorts and cruise ships have this sort of same issue, which is that before we start about the issue from the all-inclusive resorts, there are absolutely some tourist destinations in the world that have really like embraced all-inclusive resorts and themselves have marketed themselves to all-inclusive resorts. An example is the Maldives. The Maldives is a destination where they've like set aside islands for resorts to open on, and the Maldives is like, hey, our goal for tourism is not to bring tourists to like the main island of the Maldives to, you know, mingle with our locals, because there are going to be all sorts of issues. So instead, these islands that we have up the coast, we're going to encourage people to build all-inclusive resorts there. The tourists are going to come in to the main airport. They're going to get flown or boated over to these other islands, and then they'll enjoy their time in the resort, and then they'll just leave. And okay, maybe when it's on an island, the issue's not as big, but when it's in a town, or it's in a beach, or it's in like Jamaica, they very much tend to create a ghost town around them, a ghost town where the tourists don't go anymore because they paid all this money to go to the all-inclusive resort. Why would they patronize any business outside of the all-inclusive resort? Because any food they've already paid for, any drinks they've already paid for, entertainment they've already paid for. So they're really, it's the sunk cost mentality. They're really incentivized in their brain to not leave the resort so that they can get their money's worth, which really doesn't do anything to benefit the community. Certainly, there have been a number of these big beach hotels in places like Cancun, Mexico, that tend to like, they take over the beach. You know, they're like, this is now my resort. There was beach access. There is no longer any beach access because, well, it's mine now. It's mine. You have to buy access to the beach by buying into this hotel. And to Carmen's point, I hear a lot about this about cruise ships too, where cruise destinations will be like, hey, this cruise ship coming in here going to be so great for us because it's going to bring all these tourists in. It's going to bring all this money in. And it turns out cruise passengers don't spend much money in their port stops because they don't eat dinner at the port stop. Maybe they don't even eat lunch. You know, they like entertainment. They've got a show back on the ship, and so they tend to get off the cruise. Maybe they do like an organized tour group that like forces them to go to a couple of vendors along their way, but they're not having a fancy dinner. They're not spending money at a hotel. The places that like do get money on the cruise passengers are the big, like the ports, like the actual like where people embark and disembark from the cruise. Places like San Diego, where people board the cruise, because if they're flying here, they need to likely spend the night before in a hotel, and they're going to have dinner, and then they're going to have breakfast, and that brings money into the local community. But when the Disney cruise makes its port stop in Ensenada, people are getting off, walking around, and then getting back on the ship to ultimately have dinner. Vegas High Rollers, thank you so much for your support. Vegas High Trollers, Vegas High Trollers says tourism is crucial for cities like Las Vegas and all the single mothers working places like the Sapphire and the Rhino. Thank you very much, Vegas High Trollers. Now, Larry says certainly one of the issues is that also the great information available to people allows them to know other amazing places that are not local. Absolutely. It's also great to see Panjo in the chat, so everybody be worried about the giveaway later because Panjo is here. Kathy says, I love cruising. I've got 4 cruises booked. And Kathy then says, oh, there was a comment that Kathy left about cruising that I can't find. It's all about time. You don't have that much time, and so you can't spend that much money. Trinidaddy says the Maldives is a great idea. I visited my homeland Trinidad, and you know a generation is lost when all they care about is Starbucks. Interesting. We'll talk about that culture, the culture aspects of tourism in a little bit. Kathy says that Aulani in Hawaii, the public can still use the beach. I agree. And I think Ko'olina in Hawaii is a great example of a resort development, that's where the Aulani is, that benefits the public too. And there are certainly some people who will say, well, there's no parking right by the Aulani. Yeah, there's no parking right. There's a few public parking spaces. There's a big public parking lot just a cove or 2 down, which is where I park when I go down there. And there's all these clean bathrooms. Like there's all these bathrooms that were built up in Ko'olina in this resort town around Aulani that are maintained by the hotels, that are paid for by the hotels. And so I think that's a great example of getting the tourist dollars to flow in and then benefit something for the locals too. The big parking lot, none of the parking was there before. The big parking lot, the toilets, all those things are great examples of benefiting it. I think another like example of where regulation comes in, and we can all complain about how California has too much regulation, but California has a thing called the California Coastal Commission, and the California Coastal Commission is all about providing a few things, but certainly one of the things they're focused on is access to the coast in California, saying that access to the coast is a public right, and that private corporations or people cannot take that away. You've certainly seen the fake signs in Malibu about people saying it's a private beach, even though it isn't. Laguna Beach is another one where people would rope off some sand and be like, this is my sand, you can't get on my sand. There was recently a big development in Southern California in the city called Dana Point that was a big housing development with these like $20 million houses. They put gates up around it, guards around it, and the California Coastal Commission eventually came in and said like, you need to provide access to the public. Can't lock those gates. You can lock it from cars, but you're gonna need to provide a way for people to walk through. And so now you as a person can walk through this development of $20 million houses, and this development has put security guards to stand there to make sure you don't go to their houses, but people can get back down to the beach again. And the bathrooms that are there, they weren't there before. It even has a funicular, like a thing that goes down this hill, all paid for by the housing development. So when it's done right, then I can benefit it too, because I and my mom can ride the funicular to go down to the beach instead of walking 200 steps. Han says the reservation system remnant of COVID is the bane of my existence. Need an alternative solution, don't you think? I agree. I don't love the reservation for things like hiking trails and this and that. It's really, it's tough. It's tough to not be able to do the thing or not be able to do the thing on the date that you want. Maybe we'll talk about some options as we go. Carmen says, yes, beach access is one of the best things about California. And Elias says the California Coastal Commission is wonderful. And Kathy says if I ever wanted to organize a Yellow Productions cruise, she would be up for it. All right, thank you for that recommendation. Kathy, I think this was from Points Travelers Creston when Points Travelers said, Kathy, when are you taking us all on a cruise? Because Kathy knows how to do it. Points Traveler says, that's the Cali tax money actually going to something useful. Absolutely. Okay, the fourth issue facing modern tourism today is the zombie hordes created by bus tours. I have to drink first. What am I drinking today? Today I am drinking this tea by Little Jasmine. Turns out not a jasmine tea. What is it? It is lychee oolong tea. Lychee is a Asian fruit that's really quite tasty. It has a nice light fruity taste to it, not too overpowering. Oolong tea is generally pretty strong, so that fruity taste kind of balances the power of the strong tea with the fruity taste. Oh, I said I was going to talk about pros and cons in this video on each thing so that it isn't just a complaint fest, and so let's go back to 3 for a moment. What are the pro of all-inclusive resorts and cruises? And that is people who are travelers can really be able to travel on a fixed budget. If the all-inclusive resort is $2,000, you know that's what you're going to spend when you get there. Same on many cruises. You can say, well, I'm going to spend $2,000 on the cruise, and I can meet my budget, as opposed to, I don't know how much it's all going to cost. I get asked this question all the time for people saying, like, Chris, I'm going to Tokyo. How much money should I bring every day? I don't know, because I don't know where you're eating. I don't know what you're doing. Range is huge, but not on a cruise. The range is really small because most everything is covered. Same in the all-inclusive resorts. Okay, and Grovel says, do you go to Asian supermarkets for all of my drinks? I mean, not all of my drinks, but for many of my drinks do. This tea I got this past weekend when we were having a sushi picnic in Huntington Beach. They were doing a Civil War reenactment in Huntington Beach, and we went to Mitsuya, the local Japanese supermarket. They were having a Hokkaido sushi festival. Fresh fish from the northern part of Japan flown in, really great. We took it as a picnic and enjoyed a bunch of people shooting cannons and guns, obviously blanks, but it was a lot of fun to visually see the reenactment of this war. And Larry says, another pro of the all-inclusive resort, thank you for sharing this because I love to talk about both sides of these things, is that there are different types of travelers and vacationers. All-inclusives are often easier for people as there's less required planning. I agree with the same thing with cruises, right? You book a cruise and you don't have to plan nearly as much because a lot of it is planned for you. Blind Man Travel says, by the way, Blind Man Travels, thank you for your support. Blind Man Travel says, cruises can be fun. However, if you buy drinks or an optional dining package, you are less likely to buy when you're on shore. Absolutely. Why would you buy your drinks on the shore when you've already paid for all of your drinks on the ship? Of the Tide says, I recently watched your videos on Waikiki, a sunset walk. It looked absolutely awful. The place, not your video, way overcrowded and insanely cluttered with folding chairs. And I would say of the Tide, certainly it depends what you're looking for when you're looking for a beach. There are many people who are like, I love the people, I love the energy. Those are the same people who love Las Vegas, you know? But if what you're looking for is a relaxing beach where it's just you and the sound of the ocean, Waikiki, definitely not that. Okay, we're really on the number 4, which is the issue of the zombie hordes created by bus tours. Now, this affects more destinations than others. Some are affected more than others because not all destinations are conducive to bus tours, but in places that are conducive to bus tours, and there's tons of bus tour operators, you tend to get throngs of people all showing up at the same time, all at the same place. The tour buses also allow people to descend on places that might not have been very accessible otherwise because they're not close to public transportation, they're not close to cities, they're hard to find if you're driving. But if you're being on a bus and somebody's driving you, they can drive you there en masse, even if there's no parking, because they can drop you off and come back to pick you up again. Now, I've experienced this from all sides. I have taken my share of bus tours. Honestly, they really aren't my thing. They really don't work well when I'm trying to make content. Like when we're trying to shoot videos, bus tours are designed for people to like go out, spend a little bit of time, take a selfie, get back on the bus and go to the next thing. And of course I'm like, I can't have 20 minutes at the stop. I need like an hour or two at this stop. And then I've also been in a lot of destinations with a lot of tour groups. And I've also been to those same destinations during COVID when the tour groups were gone, and they're very different. So experience I'll share with you is in Taipei, Taiwan, a place that we go often. There historically have been lots of tour groups that descend on Taipei from other parts of Asia, particularly from mainland China, particularly to visit the National Palace Museum. If you go back in the history of things, when Chiang Kai-shek's army left the mainland of China to Taiwan, they took all of these antiquities with them, the best Chinese antiquities, and put them in this museum in Taipei. So, Chinese people like to see these antiquities. Where do they see them? They're not in mainland China, they're in Taiwan. Now, this museum got so popular, so many bus tours, that they actually built a separate lower level entrance just for the buses, and it got so crazy that they installed digital screens in the museum so that at any time you could see exactly how many people are in the museum, because like fire count, and they're like, we can never have more than like 5,000 people. I don't know if that's the number, but we'll go for it. 5,000 people in the museum, and you can see up there exactly how many people are inside. And when it was really busy, when it was full of bus tours, to see a couple pieces of art, the jade cabbage and the pork rock, not the Mona Lisa. There's a cabbage that's in the shape of a jade, and there's a natural rock that looks like a piece of pork. You could easily be in line for an hour because all of the tour groups, they'd get in line together, and this line would snake down the museum. And now when Osigro and I and the Curious Princess went back 2 years ago after COVID, it was so much better. The museum was so much better. It was night and day better because the tour groups from China had not yet returned. What was the con of that? We got to enjoy the museum, but we couldn't eat at the food court. They used to have a really good food court next to the museum, but the food court couldn't open because there were no tour groups. There were not enough visitors to support it, right? There's the pro and the con. It's not busy, but now the other businesses that had popped up around the museum, they were all gone because the locals weren't spending their time and money at those restaurants. Taipei 101, the tallest building in Taipei that you see like for New Year's, things like that, it looks like a piece of bamboo. Another destination that's been overrun by tour groups because it has an amazing food court. Especially because the National Palace Museum is closed. But once the tour groups discovered the Taipei 101 food court, the locals in Taipei, they don't go anymore because there's no place to sit. I've even found that myself. Like I went there and I'm like, there's no place to sit for me, and I'm a tourist. I'm a lousy tourist there. I can't sit either, so I don't even go there anymore. Now, when I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for a while, I had similar experiences with summer school tour groups. Many schools in the USA at a particular grade level, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, depends on the school, depends on the state, depends on the city, but schools will often take a whole grade field trip to Washington, D.C. to see the capital of the USA. And they need to eat. But where do they go to eat? One of the places they go to eat is this mall called the Pentagon City Mall. It is the biggest food court in the Washington, D.C. area. One that I enjoyed too. I like food courts. But not when the school tour groups were there. They give the kids a coupon that they can redeem at like any of the food court vendors. And so I learned not to visit when they're there. What's really funny about this, though, is that the quality that I felt these school kids exhibited in this food court were many of the things that like people like the person who wrote this Laguna Beach article complained about tourists. These school kids in this food court, they are loud, they're rowdy, they're rude, they're running around everywhere, they leave trash everywhere on the table. I make these stark generalizations. Not all of them were loud, not all of them were rowdy. You know, it's probably 3% of them that were loud, rowdy, and left their trash on the table. But then I am left to generalize about this group of 97% very nice children and 3% that are real stinkers. You know, but like maybe this was a bummer for me because I wouldn't go to that mall during those times, but it was good for the mall and it was good for the food court, like big business. And bringing these kids on the bus is the cheapest way for them to go to Washington, D.C., maybe the only time in their life they're going to see our nation's capital. You know, I think this is another one that we heard about pros of things, right, related to cruise ships. You know, pros of bus tours is that bus tours are easy. You can get on a bus, takes you to all the places. You don't have to do a lot of planning. And it can also be a lot cheaper to utilize bus tours because you're not paying for all the transportation yourself. Kathy says, we had trouble finding somewhere to eat when we were on the National Mall. Grant says we went to the Union Station food court. If you are going to Washington, D.C., yes, there's a very big food court in the bottom of Union Station. And that is one where, like, wax and wane during COVID, too. I liked the food court at the bottom of Union Station. And during COVID time, all the tourists are gone. All those places closed. It was super sad. And there was like no place to eat in Union Station. And it was great when I was back there 6 months ago to see life again there as well. Stern says, I went on so many trips to DC during my school years. Kathy says, I love the food court at Taipei 101. Kathy also says she's been to the National Museum and she saw the Meat Rock. Tina says, did you ever go to Thailand? Sure have. I have a great series on Thailand, primarily Bangkok, but we very much enjoyed it. All right. Let's go on to number 5. The 5th issue facing modern tourism today is businesses that are focusing on tourists. Chris, why is that? Why is that bad? Well, let's talk through this. So, in particular, because in a place that maybe didn't have a lot of tourists, now has a lot of tourists, businesses often realize that they can make more money from the tourists than they can from the locals. Many people who live in Southern California feel this way about Disneyland. For the longest time, Disneyland had a very, I'm not going to use the word generous, a very desirable annual pass program. Many people who lived in Southern California would have annual passes to Disneyland. Seagull and I had annual passes to Disneyland for nearly 20 years of our life. That's right. But for the past few years, they've been restricting the number of passes sold. They've been making it harder and more difficult to park, requiring advanced reservations and limiting the number of people. So they've limited the number of annual passes, and then they limit the number of annual pass holders that can go in any certain day, just really making it much less appealing to get the annual pass. Even though these annual passes are like $900 now, they're not cheap. Some would say that Disneyland prefers the visitors rather than the locals because the visitors spend more. The locals are never going to spend $500 a night at the hotel. The visitors often don't eat breakfast. The visitors often don't eat dinner. But the visitors do all of that and do all of it often on the Disneyland property. And so who is Disneyland going to go after? They're going to go after the people that spend the most money, but then they're going to erode their support from the local population that has loved growing up at Disney. And then all these people who live in Anaheim around Disney are like, this place has gotten so expensive, I can't go there anymore. So when Disneyland comes around and says like, hey, we need some special permission to do this and that, and then the locals go, nah, I don't know if you're going to get those tax breaks anymore because I don't get to enjoy it as much anymore. Those tax breaks are for somebody else. Now, I think that on this reservation system, I think that Hawaii is one that is like figuring their way through reservations, and I don't think they figured out reservations all that well at the start. An example I'll use is Diamond Head. So many people were hiking Diamond Head. There was no place to park, long lines to get into the parking lot. people would say, well, it's not enjoyable because there's so many people on the trail, and so they instituted a reservation system to hike Diamond Head, the most popular hike on Oahu. Now, then the locals would say, well, I never get to walk it anymore because I can never get a reservation. And so what they've done instead is they've said, well, if you're local, like if you have a Hawaii driver's license, then you don't need a reservation. You live here. Come on in. Hike at any time, because there's never that many of you. It's always so many of the tourists, never that many of you as locals. And so now the locals are kind of like, oh, well, I'm okay with that. Yeah, limit the tourists so that I can enjoy this trail more and I can go anytime I want. Now, another like positive thing that's like a business focusing on tourists that seems to work out, that isn't evil, that people don't hate, is another one in Hawaii. An example I'll use is the ABC store. If you've never been to the ABC store is like a convenience store just for tourists. It's everything a tourist going to the beach in Hawaii would ever need, from snacks to drinks to cheap t-shirts to cheap beach towels to cheap sunscreen. And you know what, the locals love it too, right? Like everybody I ever talked to was like, I love the ABC stores. They're so amazing, even though they're a business that completely depends on and caters to tourists. So that doesn't necessarily have to be an evil thing. These things can help benefit people too. Conversation about Disneyland is, Yip Animation says, as much as the Disneyland Hotel is my favorite hotel, why would I stay there when my place is only 30 to 45 minutes away and I can decorate my place in Disney theme? Yep, I mean, same thing. We live pretty close to Disneyland, so why would we stay in a hotel there? People always ask me for recommendations on hotels, and I give them based upon the ones I perceive to be the best, based on what I hear from other people and proximity to the park, but I have no reason to review them because it's just be a waste of money. Kathy says, I love the ABC store, great value. And Kathy says in Hawaii, there's an ABC shop on almost every corner in the tourist districts. There sure is. Crayon Dude says, sometimes the best restaurants are the ones least popular with tourists in towns far from popular tourist cities. Crayon Dude, I couldn't agree with you more, because restaurants that focus on tourists, and this is something I like, growing up in San Diego, where I told you, one of the US's #1 tourist destinations. So many tourists come to San Diego. So there's this huge market of people that are only gonna ever eat at these restaurants once. And so what these restaurants do in San Diego, particularly in the downtown area, is they make themselves look really nice. They're really, I'm not even gonna use the word fancy, but they're just like cool looking. And you're like, that place looks cool. I want to eat there. And then you eat there and you're like, the food is really mediocre. This place has definitely spent all of its money on the look and not on the actual food. And they don't have to, because all they need to do is get people in. And once people are in and they've sat down at the table, and they're not going to leave, they're going to order their food. And they're not going to come back, but they're not going to come back anyway. And so yes, in places that tend to have more of a stable population, and I say this now living in Orange County, home of Disneyland. Not all of Orange County is Disneyland. Orange County has a much more stable population than San Diego does. Orange County has a lot more places where there's no tourists, and the restaurants there tend to absolutely be better than the restaurants in the touristy areas. Yes, Culture says the old Rainforest Cafe strategy. That's it. The place is gonna have like gorillas and parrots, and the place will be so cool. You'll just come in and you'll get some really mediocre chicken tenders and a really low quality hamburger. Yeah, Stern Shadow says focuses on look over quality. Sounds like Disney World restaurant. Absolutely, absolutely. But you know what? It works. It absolutely works. The sad part about this is in downtown San Diego, there was an Italian place that OC Girl and I absolutely loved. It was called Acqua All #2. It was started by a family from Florence, Italy. They have a restaurant in Florence, and they opened a second one in San Diego. Amazing Italian-style pasta. But they did not know how to open a restaurant downtown San Diego. The place didn't look cool. They didn't have like, a cute girl at the front to holler at people, to get them to come in, to sit down. And I'm not telling you that's what I need for a restaurant, but I'm telling you, like, if you go to downtown San Diego, you will see a, like, 20-something-year-old girl in front of every single restaurant to kind of, like, holler at you, to be like, hey, come on in, take a look at our menu. And when they don't have that, they couldn't compete. And sadly went out of business, but I felt like they were one of the best places to eat in downtown San Diego that downtown San Diego has ever had. Okay. Let's go on to number 6. The 6th issue facing modern tourism today is environmental impacts. So there's certainly like direct effects to the environment, environmental damage, wildlife destruction, deforestation, water pollution, volcanoes. There's indirect effects, such as we got to harvest more natural resources to supply food. Maybe there's more air and water pollution because there's more people here, including things from flights and transportation. But I think this is one where, like, the garbage issue, you know, it's like, well, if there's no trash cans, certainly people have to throw stuff out. In San Diego, on July 4th, the beach is a disaster. Like, people bring everything to the beach. They bring sofas from their house and leave it on the beach. And so, yes, there's a big citywide cleanup effort on July 5th to, like, pick up all the trash from the beach. But it's one to be like, well, hopefully we charge tourists enough and generate enough on tax revenue of 20% or something a night on hotel rooms that we can, like, make that back and then, like, help fund the cleanup that actually goes to the beach. But done right, tourism can create access to natural areas that didn't exist before. For example, in Canada, there's so many tourists that go to Banff, but Banff also has really cool things you can do. Like, Banff has glaciers, and because there's so many tourists that go to Banff and there's glaciers, there's a company that operates these tours to go on the glacier and on these big mobiles. And yes, before the big mobiles, you could, like, hike a day to get to a glacier on guided glacier hikes. Many of us are not up for a guided glacier hike, but many of us can pay to go on a big wheelie machine that this company maintains and trains drivers on, builds and engineers to get us up to stand on a glacier the one time in most of our lives that we're ever going to stand on a glacier and put a bottle in the little running stream on it to, like, drink water from a glacier. We loved it as one of our favorite experiences in Banff, and I think, again, done right, they spend a lot of time being like, we make sure every day we kind of, like, patch up the parts that we drive on. We don't want to destroy this glacier because we want it to be here for, you know, generations to enjoy. Although glaciers melt, but you get the point. I think Japan is really good at this too. Like, Japan, on, like, popular hikes, will build a lot of like raised bridges and things like that, so that as you're walking on the hike, you're not necessarily destroying the natural environment. But then also now, because they built this flat boardwalk type thing, more people can get to the blowhole or the hot spring than they could when it was a slippery dirt path. The 7th impact from tourism is health effects. Chris, what about health effects? And this is interesting. Tourism can have both positive and negative health effects on locals. What are they? Well, the short-term negative impacts are often related to density of tourist arrivals. Can be things like the risk of disease transmission, road accidents. You know, the Grand Canyon is a very dangerous place to drive. You know why? So nearly everybody in the Grand Canyon, not from the Grand Canyon, don't know how to drive in the USA on icy roads when it's winter. Higher crime level. You know, in California, we've been having people that have been, like, traveling in from Latin America to break into houses in, like, the Hollywood Hills. They, like, organize these things where they all get on a plane and they all go target a house of some famous actor to break in. It's crazy. And you might say, well, if there wasn't an airport close by or it wasn't easy to get there, maybe they wouldn't do it as much. I don't know. Is that true? Traffic congestion and, you know, maybe some other factors. But at the same time, there are positive effects of tourism, positive health effects that include often improved healthcare access, because if you've got a lot of people coming in, particularly in a mountain town, skiing, you know what you're going to have? More hospitals, more doctors' offices, positive emotions. novelty, like new things, new experiences, and social interactions. People who may have been isolated might have a whole bunch of new friends because they've got more people visiting this place, only if they decide to partake in it, of course. All right. Number 8, the 8th issue facing modern tourism today, and this can go both ways, we got positive and negative for all of these, is economic impacts. And so I'm probably going to start on the positive side of this one, and then we'll hit the negative side. So the economic impacts for tourism, place like San Diego, #1 industry, so the economic impact is huge. But in 2019, so this is a statistic from before COVID, every year about 1.5 billion people would visit another country. And tourist spending contributes $1.3 trillion to the global economy. It's a lot of money. And so when like economic people look at tourism spending, they tend to divide it into 3 main areas. They look at direct spending from visitors on tourism experiences, like beach holidays and theme parks. They look at it with businesses that spend things to attract tourists or buy things to support the tourists, and then capital investment. Someplace like Disneyland builds a new roller coaster. That's a capital investment in tourism. Then there's indirect spending, all the stuff needed to support tourism, like additional supplies for restaurants during the high season of tourism, or widened sidewalks in busy areas. And then there's induced spending, which is the recirculation of the tourist dollar within a community. So tourists come and they bring money, and they go to somebody and buy a leather bag, and that was a artisan vendor, and now that person has more money than they had before that they can go spend with someone else. There's certainly positive impacts, more jobs available, higher quality of life, increased income and wealth, potentially the rebuilding of historic sites, and encouraging the revitalization of cultures. This is something I see a lot in Korea, where they're rebuilding their national palace and a lot of their historic sites that were destroyed in previous wars with Japan. And turns out that people love to come visit those things and pay money to visit them, even though they're fake. I shouldn't say they're fake. They're rebuilt. They're not the original ones, but the tourists enjoy them. It spreads Korean culture, and ultimately it's a win-win for everybody. Definitely, I will hit a negative on the economy in my conclusion section. So save that thought. We're gonna go to number 9, which is jobs. Jobs. Travel and tourism create about 10% of the total jobs available worldwide. Now, this is if you add up the direct tourism sector and the indirect tourism sector, so things that support tourism and tourism itself. It's a lot of jobs. So employment can also not just be from the tourism things, but also in construction, because as more people come, you need airports, and you need ports, and you need all those things to support the cruises. Impact on culture. When it works well, tourism can create jobs and businesses and revenue for local craftspeople, who are then able to sell their crafts to the tourists. Rural tourism is often seen as a cure for poverty in many rural areas. But there's also this notion of culture, people who study culture. This is not me. I really dive deep to find 10. So people who study culture will say that contact with tourists in a place may lead, well, these people say will, but may, here we'll say may, lead to the destruction of pre-tourist cultures. And bringing outside influences may lead in these cultures to drug abuse, crime, pollution, social instability, and growth of capitalist values and a consumer culture. Now, this phrase is called the demonstration effect. That people see other people demonstrate a different way of doing things, a different set of habits, and then they decide to do them too. But when I came up with my initial set of titles for this video, Is that it? Is that tourism ruining the world? Or is that the internet ruining the world? Or is that TikTok ruining the world? Because these people, you know, the internet, the world is a global place with the internet now. And like these sorts of behaviors, they're not just things that you're only going to see from people visiting you, but they're things that you'll see on any odd corner of the internet that you choose to visit. And we all know that TikTok is the great culture destroyer. All right. So what's my conclusion here? And then we'll do some Q&A. I feel like one of the big problem with like all of these negative effects is that by the time a place is feeling the negative effects, it's too late to impose restrictions and regulations. Tourist destinations like Laguna Beach right here seem to discover the negative impacts only found when it is too late in the development stage of things. The place is built out, there's no place for parking, the beaches are overrun. What do? We can't do anything. We've boxed ourselves into a corner. Now we just suffer with this crush of people. But I think it's one where when you do find localities and places where the government, regulators, businesses, influencers kind of all work together. I'm going to use a place like Las Vegas as an example. Las Vegas was built on tourism. That place wouldn't exist if tourists didn't go there. And when it's harnessed appropriately, you can build an amazing place. But yes, you guys, then like Las Vegas, they're constantly looking at like, how do we make this flow look better? How do we build overhead bridges over the strip so that people don't get run over? What are better public transportation things we can do? Maybe we build a monorail, but then it's also supporting the industry. You know, when Elon Musk comes around and says, hey, maybe I can build an underground tunnel and maybe that'll help in Vegas. You know, Vegas is like, okay, go ahead, let's give it a try. I mean, in like Japan, as an example, when people talk about how amazing the train and subway system is in Tokyo, I think what many people don't realize is that like much of that train and subway infrastructure is not public, it's not government run. They're privately run. They're private train lines. These companies built these trains and operate them, and they compete against each other. But the government had to be there when somebody says like, hey, I want to dig a tunnel underground to build my rail line. The government had to be there to be like, okay, well, let's figure out how you do that. Because if you do it right, it's gonna work for all of us. All right. Well, it is now time for...
Fellow explorers, it is now Q&A time. If you've got a question, I've got an answer.
It's now time for Q&A. Or if you had a thought about an issue that I didn't share, please let me know. We'll take a little bit of Q&A. And then as always, we will do a giveaway after the Q&A. What's our giveaway today? Our giveaway today is on the new Yellow Productions Panda Princess shirt right here. Every month for the next few months, I am unveiling a new Yellow Productions shirt design. This is the one today. For the month that they're out, they are at a discount price of $20. Last month was the Panda Boba shirt, and then they go back up to full price of $25. If you did want to pick one of those shirts up, you will find a link in the chat, or if you're on the live stream and you want to pick this one up, you will find a pinned comment right at the top. By the way, thank you to Points Explorer. He's been a channel member for 12 months supporting Yellow Productions, so I appreciate it. Thank you. CIAR says, have you ever been to New Mexico before? Santa Fe and Albuquerque. I have been to both of those places before. I didn't do any videos on them because they were short trips. We took like a weekend trip to Albuquerque, visited Santa Fe. I think I've probably been to Albuquerque 3 times. I've like driven through it, been there a couple times on various trips. There's like an aerial tramway or aerial cable car that you take up to the peak that was sort of nice. I enjoyed some of like the Southwest Mexican food that was down there. It's often called the Land of Enchantment. I really want to go there for the balloon fiesta in Albuquerque. It's so far from everything. That's my problem on Albuquerque. Meritocratic Mafia says, have you considered a simulcast to Twitch to widen your audience? I've not. Should I? I don't know. I feel like Twitch is the place where you have to like live stream for like 18 hours a day or something to get noticed. But I appreciate the suggestion. If you see another data point of people who live stream for 1 hour a week and got an audience over there, let me know. Aloha State of Mind says, how do I feel about being a tourist in Hawaii? Do you feel welcome or not by local? Great question, Aloha State of Mind. And many of you might have seen, I posted up on my community page a question about what have you heard about the state of affairs in Hawaii? One of it was to like prepare for this video to see what y'all think about the state of tourism and the message in a place like that. And two, is I actually chatted with a reporter who's working on an article about the kind of like state of the tourism message in Hawaii. And so Aloha State of Mind, personally, I feel welcomed by locals. I know that there are like messages out there, and I even get them on my videos, which are like, we don't want you to come to Hawaii. But I realize that that is the minority rather than the majority. Every time I go to Hawaii, I definitely feel the aloha. I definitely feel the aloha spirit. And I love the people who live in Hawaii and the warmth that they exhibit. Wanda says, how do you feel about the Japanese government restricting access to Kyoto's geisha district, Gion? Right, and that's obviously like some of the streets that the geisha go on. I've certainly read those stories about like people being like really rude, like photos, like cameras in their face and things like that. Wanda, I'm gonna say I'm okay with it, right? Like, as tourists, there's still so much of Kyoto that we can visit. There's still so much of that district that we can visit. There's just a couple of streets that they're kind of like, hey, if you could not come down here, we'd really appreciate it. And if that makes it so that the locals who actually live there, like, fine, we can breathe a little bit, then I'm okay. I mean, if they don't do that, then they put up walls and charge for admission and, make it like... Then they make it like LA, where LA is like the only nice places have walls and are private places, and all the public places are kind of like, eh. So, where Japan has a lot of very nice public places. Adam says, do you feel the need to speak another language when traveling to certain places? I make an attempt to learn little bits of the local language when I go. I am fluent in no other languages other than English. I speak a little bit of Spanish. I grew up in San Diego. I can... Donde está el baño? Where is the bathroom? I can, yo quiero Taco Bell? Is that, I can speak a little bit of Japanese. I can speak enough to order a mizu, a water. I can order a biru, a beer. I speak a little bit of Chinese. 我会说一点中文. But I think that like just knowing a few phrases really helps the locals go like, oh, you're trying. And you don't just come up to me and like, start speaking English right away. I think like one of the phrases that's best to learn any place that you're going is the phrase, if you're an English speaker, do you speak English in their language? And just starting with that is something where they're like, oh, I appreciate you so much that you tried. All right. Narrow Road offers a thought on Hawaii where he says activists and government officials will talk about not wanting tourists, but mostly locals really want and need them. Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Darkson says, hey, when you're not using points or credit cards, do you ever book through travel agents advisors? No. Rarely. I should say rarely. No is not the right answer. When we book through travel agents and advisors is for some of our Asia travel, where the travel agents actually have better prices than any of the online sources. But other than that, because we're sort of like, we really want to be in the weeds of planning everything. I also run a travel channel. So like, all the research and doing it and all those things, I mean, I just sort of see as like part of what I do, which is then I can learn from it and then I can talk about it. Whereas if I outsource it, then I don't learn very much. I totally get it though. I get, we're planning a trip to Southwest England coming up here, and like things like, what's the train that we take from London to Bath, and what train company runs those trains? There's a whole bunch of different trains you could take, and which train station does it leave from, and what's the best option, and what's the fastest, and where do I pick up a rental car in Bath, because there's not like an airport in Bath, and so it's not straightforward. Is it better to pick up a rental car there? Is it better to pick up a rental car in London, or is it better to pick up a rental car at London Heathrow? Anyway, those are all things that a travel agent could probably help me out with, but they're all the things that then when I just do those searches myself, and I'm like, well, a rental car, if I pick it up at London Heathrow, will cost me $100 for a week. If I pick it up in downtown London, it'll cost me $2,000 for a week. Or if I pick it up in Bath, it'll cost me $300 a week, and I can return it at London Heathrow. That sounds pretty good. I run you through all of that to say that those are all the things that then I can talk about when I make a video about things you need to know before you go someplace. No nonsense says planning can be more fun than actual traveling. There are certainly people who enjoy travel planning. I would say I enjoy a trip planned well. And then I know I have nobody else than myself to blame if it wasn't good. And if it wasn't good and I booked it through a travel agent, I would be cursing them the whole time. Curse you, curse you. Crayon Dude says, do you plan to write a travel tips book in the future? I don't know. Should I, Crayon Dude? Would you buy a book that I wrote? What would I write it? Would I write it on things I talk about here on YouTube? I don't know. I've not seriously considered it, but I guess if enough of you say, Chris, write one, maybe I will. Hey, if that guy Chris Broad from abroad in Japan could write a book about living in Japan, maybe I can write a book about something too. Yip Animation says, another issue is booking a seat and then finding out that behind you are inconsiderate passengers such as young kids who constantly kick the seat. How do you deal with these issues? I guess I probably just suck it up. I mean, but I will say that, maybe I just give them a look, right? Like if they're kicking my seat, every once in a while I'll just kind of like, yeah. And I mean, if the people have any wherewithal, they're the parents or whatever, like when they see you craning over and kind of like looking at them, they don't have to say anything. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Is there like an earthquake back there or something? Because I think trying to tell parents how to control their kids just never works at all. I feel like what's worse than that is just, when you end up with the inconsiderate armrest people, the people who are not on the armrest, but they're in your seat. I'm like, hey, 'cause I'm a big person too, and stuff. But I will be the person who will be like, hey, when the other person's like, meh. But then at the moment that they kind of whatever, they get up to use the restroom or something like that, then I'm staking my position. I'm not giving up. Darkson says, write a children's book about the traveling princess and her escapades of travel. That sounds like a lot of fun. Point Traveler says, did you see that Chris Broad opened a bar in Shibuya? I saw the video about it, and I hadn't watched it yet, the current one, because I know he's opened some bars for a day at a time, but I'll watch that one to see more about it. Narrow Road says, how about a coffee table book of you wearing Yellow Productions t-shirts in worldwide locations? I have a lot of selfies of me wearing Yellow Productions shirts around the world. When I go to places I've been a bunch of times before, do you still plan out what you're going to do? Yes and no. I mean, I still have a notion of things I'm going to do, but I don't plan out the same way I do for a place I haven't been before. A place I haven't been before, I write a Google Doc about these are the place I want to go to, tier 1, tier 2, roughly the things we want to do in certain days. It's like an itinerary. It's not down to times. It's down to things in days, things we can fit in there. But if I'm going back to I don't know, when I go back to Hawaii, I generally don't outline it as much unless I'm making a video on it. Like when Yusaku and I did the video on the North Shore, we had an outline of all the things we want to go to, and we did not make it to all the things that we want to go to. We spent a whole bunch of time making the video. But in order to kind of just keep ourselves where are we going to next, it was worthwhile to have that written down. My dog is bad. He says, do I have any thoughts on the Pacific Coast Highway closure till 2025? I'm going to Big Sur and I have to take the 101 to Monterey. Yeah, it's a bummer. It's been closed for a long time, so I hope it reopens soon. It keeps getting closed and closed. Alex says, Yellow Productions, My Life in Stories, the Chris Rainey autobiography. All right, thank you for that title. Stern says, how do you choose the place that you travel to? What inspires you to go to a place that you haven't been before? That is a great question, because I feel like that deserves a longer answer, Stern Shadow. Cottage Full of Love, in a post that I posted on my community page a while ago, said Chris, can you make a video about planning for international travel? And I feel like Stern Shadow, that's a great question to put in that live stream, which I think that I will do in about 2 weeks. So I'm gonna put that there. And I've also had requests on money, Chris, what do you do for money internationally? But anybody who has any other questions about planning for international travel or things like that, I will answer that in there. We'll take a couple more questions and then we'll do the giveaway. No Nonsense says, how did you drive in Japan? How did you learn how to drive on the other side of the road? No Nonsense, I have a whole video about driving in Japan. If you search for Yellow Productions, driving in Japan, you will find it. Okay, that was that question before that came back up again. There was one other question I see up here, which Culture says, do you ever feel like needing to film Ruins trip? Never, never. We enjoy it. Like, I enjoy it. I enjoy the act of making the video. Definitely, like, we can do less things because we're making videos. And there are days that we'll be like, just not filming today. Just not filming today. Not because I'm not feeling it or whatever, but like arrival days, departure days, heavy travel days. It's just too hard. Too hard. Which is why you don't see me vlog on trains a lot. You don't see me vlog on airplanes a lot. In airports, I've been doing these airport walking tours because I like get to the airport, I take out the camera, I record for 20 minutes, and I put it back away so that then I can like navigate the airport. But these people who are like vlogging, this is my pretend camera, they're vlogging when they're like going through the security checkpoint or something, or they're vlogging when they're at the ticket counter. You know, that's the one where then like the ticket agents are like, sir, can you turn off that camera? I'm gonna throw you off the plane. Like, I've seen that, right? Have you seen that? I've seen that. I don't want to be in that place. But yes, I've never found that it destroys it for me. And it even more so because we're filming, we're like, I better do this and I better do this so that it'll be good for the video, which then just kind of like forces us maybe to get out of our comfort zone. All right, it is now time for...
Yes, it's the time you've been waiting for. It's time for the giveaway.
It's time to give away the new Panda and Curious Princess Yellow Productions cruise shirt if you answer my question. My question is, how many jobs in San Diego are related to tourism? If you were the first person to put that number into the chat, you will win this shirt shipped to you anywhere in the world. If you don't win one, there's a link in the description in the chat if you're watching the live stream. It is the Yellow Production shop, shop.yellow-productions.com. If you want to know when is the next live stream, it'll probably be in 2 weeks from now. Follow me at the Yellow Productions update, sign up for my email list. I will send you an email as soon as I have a time and a topic, and so you'll know exactly when it is, so you can come back here to tune in live and try to win one of these fantastic shirts too. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we have a winner. I see we do.
And now we have a winner chicken dinner.
Congratulations to Meritocratic Mafia. You were the first person to say 200,000. That's right, 200,000 is the number of jobs in San Diego directly associated to tourism. Meritocratic Mafia, send me an email, chris@yellow-productions.com. You'll find the link in the description. Let me know your size, address, and I will get that shirt, well, a new one of those shirts, headed right out to you. Fellow explorers, thank you very much for tuning in today. For everybody who has joined the Yellow Productions channel to support the channel monthly, I really appreciate your support as well. You've been seeing their comments in green in the chat with the little panda right next to them, so thank you for your support as well. As usual, I won't say goodbye because I'm going to see you in the next video.